everyone. Welcome to the first lecture of the course. And today we're going to be looking at the Age of Discovery and how, this set off the modern era. Now, there's a lot of different discussions as to when the modern era begins. I mean, with this course, I could start it at the Renaissance, I could start it with the Reformation, but I really like starting it here because it does set up a lot of what we'll be looking at down the line. Sometimes you want to set the table before you get to the meal. So I like to start here. Plus, I find it's a really nice bridge from ancient history. So if you took the ancient history, you might hear some of the stuff from the end of that course. If you didn't take the ancient history, don't worry, you're good. Okay, today's the only day where they really kind of link together. So any examination of the origins of the modern world, we have to look at the emergence of urban centers and major cities. And with the growth of these cities came the growth of a merchant class. And we see this nowhere else more so than in Italy. And Italy really is the perfect choice to become the major center for banking and finance in Europe. And this is because it's the same reasons why it was the perfect place for the formation of the Roman Empire. Geography. Without a doubt, geography is where it comes into play. Italy is, of course, a coastal country, and this makes it a natural link between the seaports linking East and Western Europe together. That boot, both sides of that, you've got ships coming in. And, the two main coastal towns that will be important here are Genoa and Venice. They're going to play really important roles in the transportation and trade of things like Eastern spices, silks, ivories, which were considered to be huge commodities in the West. And in turn, the West would send iron, slaves, timber, grain, and oil to the East. Okay, and these two cities very quickly developed, their own levels of wealth, as well as their own military fleets to ensure that their trade routes were protected, as were the goods that they sold. And, they would start to spread out and establish trading posts and colonies deep into the East. The East is where they really wanted to go. And they had no fear of wiping out anyone who stood in their way either. A perfect example of this occurs in 1066. The Venetians, who weren't blind, it's a bad joke, I know, but I'm going to throw these in here, would use their military force to basically win concessions with merchants in North Africa. So they went and they sacked the capital city of Tunis, and basically they said, look, we'll turn the city back over to you if you cut an exclusive trade deal with us. And something just fell in my room. This gives us history's first hostile takeover. Okay, and this kind of thing was going on. Perhaps the greatest source of expansion for these European markets of Genoa and of Venice occurred during the Crusades in the Middle Ages. Okay, you might remember the Crusades if you took grade 11 history. And if you didn't take grade 11 history, we basically have 7 crusades where European kings and knights decided to travel to the Holy Land to reclaim it from the Muslims who had taken it over. And, we have these massive armies of thousands of knights making their way down there to fight. So you had 7 official crusades. You had a children's crusade where a bunch of little kids were like, hey, we want to go and do it as well. There was another crusade led by a guy named Peter the Hermit, which was, he was just kind of like a guy who was, regular person, and he said he had a vision. But perhaps my favorite of the crusades was led by a duck. Yeah, a duck. That crusade failed, and, once the people started to get really sick and they started to starve, and amazingly enough, the duck went missing. So, yeah, that story always quacks me up. So the Crusades play a major role. And what we see happening through these Crusades is one of two things. One, the merchants got in front of the crusading armies, and they would go to these towns and they'd say, hey, look, there's a big army of guys coming, a big army of knights. They're on their way. You guys sign an exclusive deal with us and you fly the flag of Venice or the flag of Genoa, and those crusaders, they're going to leave you alone. And so a lot of cities and towns and villages, they agreed to this. And so this allowed the expansion of these trade empires. The other thing that they did was that they went in behind the Crusaders and said, hey, you let us rebuild. You let us be the ones who are kind of running this market exclusively. And, we'll make sure this never happens again. Things even got so crazy that the Venetians decided to lend the church a large amount of money for these crusades. This is one of the later crusades. And what they basically said to these crusaders is, you need to attack the city of Constantinople, which was a business rival of Venice's. And they were like, you attack Constantinople for us, take it over, and we'll give you the money you need to continue on to the Holy Land. See, the problem was these crusades were set up with the idea of, if you liberate the Holy Land, you go on one of these crusades, you're forgiven all your sins and you're guaranteed a spot in heaven. Problem is, Constantinople is a Christian city. So by Venice doing this and attacking this city, they're basically going against the entire idea of what the Crusades were about. But in the end, they didn't care, because once Constantinople fell and the city was sacked, Venice becomes the major business and trade capital of Europe. So, this is kind of where all of this age of discovery is going to come out of. And it's no surprise that it's going to be a Venetian who would spark the world's imagination and create that need to further explore the world. And they're exploring the world for new business opportunities. One of the things that I really want you to keep an eye on during this course is, where do the economics come in? Every major thing we are going to look at in this course, there's an economic factor at play. And this happens more so than we see in the ancient world. In the ancient world, it's about religion, it's about power. Here, it's about money. So we're going to talk about these Venetians, who are going to make a big splash and cause this age of exploration. And you've heard the name before, Polo. Thing is, it's not the Polo you're thinking of. In 1260, two brothers from Venice, Niccolo and Matteo Polo, traveled from Italy, and they're going deeper than anyone had gone before. They were going into the empire ruled by Kublai Khan, known as the Mongol Empire. It's going to take them 5 years to get there. And this is extremely dangerous, because people had tried to go into the Mongol Empire before, and it never really panned out for them. Okay, never really panned out for them. And in fact, a number of people died, especially priests who went in there to try to minister. So they get to the capital city of Kaifeng, and they're going to actually spend until 1269 there. And the reason they don't get killed is they offer the Khan something that he can't say no to. They show up and they got boxes of jewels and money and goods for the Khan. And the Khan, surprisingly enough, really likes these guys. I mean, I would like anyone who showed up with millions of dollars as a gift for me. I mean, what are you going to say? No, I don't like you? Of course you're going to like these guys. And so he really loves these guys. And in 1269, when the brothers returned to Europe, the Khan actually sends the Pope a letter and says, hey, you're allowed to send 100 missionaries into the Mongol Empire, okay, to try to convert people. Well, I'll leave it up to my people if they want to. And you have to keep in mind, the Mongol Empire had a number of different religions. This is a major change, because usually when these missionaries went into the Mongol Empire, they were returned headless. So the Khan's message did make it to the Pope, and I should point out, the Pope still, even with that invite and that guarantee of safe passage, didn't send the requested missionaries. So the brothers went home. Part of this was a trade deal. They're carrying all kinds of goods for Europe for them to sell, and they're definitely going to recap their wealth off of this trip. They make their way back there, and unfortunately, when they get there, Niccolo was met with some bad news. Sadly, Niccolo's wife had died, and that meant that Niccolo needed to now take over the care of his son Marco, who was at that time 15 years old. Now, that's okay, because at that time, Marco is technically considered to be an adult, and he's going to be part of the family business anyway. So this isn't going to stop the Polo brothers. In fact, this is an additional hand that they are going to have. And in 1271, the two brothers and Marco began to head eastward once again. And after 4 years of journeying, they're going to meet the Great Khan. I mean, looking at a map of this journey, you're going to see that it's a really long trip. That's why it takes 4 years. You think of all the carts they probably had, walking on foot, horses, having to stop, set up camp. They run into bad weather. All of these things took so long. Now, they arrive there, and they get to meet the Great Khan. And right away, the Khan liked Marco. He really liked him. He was like, this kid is bright. This kid is the kind of guy I want working for me. He's the kind of guy I want in the service of the empire. And so he's actually going to give Marco several high-level government positions. He is going to be given the task of being an ambassador. He becomes the governor of the city of Yangzhou. I mean, this is a guy who, he's in his early 20s, and he's given the task by the Khan to run these very important places. Now, while the Great Khan enjoyed having the Polos as his subjects and diplomats, he did know that they had to leave. And he actually holds them up for a while. But he finally is like, yeah, you guys will have to leave, because you have to remember the Khan is now trading. So there's an investment that he has in this too. Now, the one reason why he really lets them leave when he does is because he's like, I need you to take one of my daughters to Persia to wed a king. He's like, instead of going back over land, I'll arrange for, there to be ships, and, you'll be able to take your goods. It will actually speed you up going across the Strait of Hormuz, which is in the Persian Gulf. Okay, so they agree. I mean, if it can knock a few years off of their trip, that means they can make their money quicker and make their way back. So the three Polos left the Khan in 1292. They have the princess with them. There's a fleet of 14 very large boats. Sorry. And each one of these boats has a number of people on them. There's over 600 passengers. They're all going to the weddings or going somewhere else. And basically, the armada, 14 boats, is going to sail from Indonesia, modern-day Indonesia, to Sri Lanka and India into their final destination, and it's there in the Strait of Hormuz in the Persian Gulf where, unfortunately, the ships go down.